A fourth reading from the ancient Egyptian tale known as Setneh II. One day, Setneh and his son, Sayosiri, observed two funeral processions, one of a rich man who is attended to with honor, and another, a poor man, who is carried off with no fanfare to the cemetery. Setneh remarks that the rich man must have been happy to be remembered with wailing and mourning. Sayosiri contradicts his father and offers to show him the fates of the poor man not mourned and the rich man who was mourned. The two visit the Duat, the land of the dead. They see that the gate's pivot rests atop one unfortunate soul's right eye, who pled for mercy and loudly cursed his fate. Setneh spies one especially distinguished servant wearing royal linen, standing by Osiris, whom he concludes must be of exceptionally high rank. After this, Sayosiri explains to his father the truth, that the richly dressed man he observed standing in a place of honor near Osiris was the unmourned poor man he had just witnessed. The rich man's burial equipment were wrested off of him and given to the poor man, whose good deeds had outweighed his misdeeds. Sayosiri reveals that the miserable man upon whose eye the gate hinged was the rich man who had been buried with honor and ceremony back in Memphis. Here ends the reading. Familiar? A little bit? This is myth. Great myths tell us what we somehow already know to be true, but are prone to forgetting. With their common ancient themes that mysteriously cross cultures, like creation out of chaos, and great floods, and giant dragons, and sentient serpents, and indeed, dark underworlds of the dead. Myths stir a deep, seemingly original place in our hearts, a collective memory of the way things have been, and a perspective on the way things are, and an inspiration for the way things might be. C.S. Lewis, a big fan of mythology, called the story of Christ a true myth, in that it, quote, works on us in the same way as the others, but with this tremendous difference, that it really happened. Lewis suggests that Christ's birth and death and resurrection are God's true myth told directly from God. And that God works in and through all of our storytellers and our poets and our writers and our composers and our artists to tell God's truth in many ways. Over and over, through time and space, tell us those things that we already know to be true, but are prone to forgetting. Lewis first posited this true myth idea in a letter he wrote to a friend in 1931, while still in the midst of his faith journey, not quite yet a practicing Christian. I detect in this letter's connection between Christ and myth a twinkle of the magic of his imagination that would create a mythical lion named Aslan and a world called Narnia 2 decades later. And Jesus of Nazareth, he was aware of the power of myth to connect us to what we already know to be true. Indeed, in today's parable, he is picking up on a well-known mythological theme. It is quite possible the very story I began with was on his mind. It's just one of the tales of the land of the dead, with reversal of fortunes and torment on one side and blessed comfort on the other, that could be found in Egyptian and Greco-Roman and Jewish traditions. As one scholar clarifies, the story is not intended as a cosmological description or an apocalypse of otherworldly secrets. It is not a map of life after death. The afterlife scene only provides a setting for the story. So no, I do not think this parable is a doctrinal teaching on the afterlife. I don't think we are meant to be preparing for Hades or hellfire. But it is, I believe, Jesus, our great storyteller, using myth to remind us of what we already know but are prone to forgetting. Our rich man asks if he can warn his loved ones who are still living about his fate, and Abraham refuses his request, insisting that if they didn't hear it from Moses and the prophets, they won't hear it from him. Because, of course, somewhere they already know, but are prone to forgetting or perhaps denying. We should not actually need new signs. We should not need a ghost to knock on our door and tell us what we already know in that original place in our hearts, because we already know it feels unnatural to walk past a suffering soul on the street. We already know the tension of locking ourselves behind walls. We already know that in the end, we can't take it with us. We already know that gates and walls cut us off from one another and prevent human flourishing. We already know that hoarding unnecessary wealth while others go hungry is not what we were created to be. We already know that placing our power and privilege on parade amidst the suffering of the world is sinister. And I think that when we deny that we already know these things, it's nothing less than the denial of who we are in that deep, original place. And that is a kind of torment. That rich man in purple robes who walls himself from the suffering of the world, he keeps showing up in ourselves, in myself, and in others. And yes, he is sure showing up all around us today. But friends, so is God. Every time, always, God shows up. The cross is never the end of the story. The suffering on the street is never the end of the story, of any of the stories. We already know that in this life, we are meant to live now as citizens of the coming realm of God that is so close we can sometimes see it, and it looks like the moment the unnamed rich man tears down that gate before it's too late, gives away what he doesn't need, steps out into his community, and finally introduces himself to Lazarus. And then the world finally knows his name too, as he crosses the chasm out of the fire and remembers what he somehow already knew to be true.